Hello everyone and welcome back to Game Brigade. If you're new here, my name is Brian. Thank you for joining me. Today is the day where we start the final countdown of the top games of all time, starting at number 20. But before we get too far, I want to say thank you to our channel sponsor, Magiseven. This video is brought to you by Magiseven Dice. Magiseven Dice has been my go-to dice for the past year. These dice are chonky and they feel great to roll. The vivid numbers are easy to read quickly during play. Magiseven just recently opened up their Amazon store for easy ordering, and you can see their wide selection of dice and gemstone offerings. So check out the link in the description below and check out Magiseven.com. Again, thank you Magiseven for sponsoring the channel. If you want to check out those links, they'll be down in the description down below. Okay, so without further ado, let's hit the first game. Starting at number 20, we have Vindication from Orange Nebula. Now, this is the giant box, I can't remember what they called it, that was from their last Kickstarter, but I don't think necessarily that you need the big box. There are several expansions that have come out with Vindication, and I think the base game, for most intents and purposes, for most players, is probably going to be just fine. Vindication is a sprawling kind of hex-based board game where you are going to be moving around using up to 3 actions to activate tiles and move your person or send your travelers on different types of adventures and quests as you try to vindicate yourself because you are one of the most vile people after you landed on an island. The theme of Vindication isn't very solid, and I would say most times I look at Orange Nebula games, it's very hard sometimes to look at their game and see what their vision is. I was nervous about this game when I originally backed it, but I was very greatly surprised with how good the gameplay of this is. I would highly recommend you checking it out. Again, it's not something that I would recommend understanding, or it's like something you have to experience for yourself to see if it's for you. If you are going to be looking at picking up Vindication though, I'll tell you right now, skip the minis. I should have listened to other people's advice. I picked up the minis for it. Completely unneeded. But yeah, that's number 20, Vindication. Coming in at number 19 is Mind MGMT from Off the Page Games. This is a hidden movement game, and I think hidden movement games are very fun and for the most part. But this one has a little bit of a twist. Players are going to take on either the role of the agents or the recruiter. The recruiter is the one that will be moving around in secret. Uses a standard type of hidden movement board where you're going to have some sort of divider blocking your movement as you try to map out each movement each turn. And the agents are going to have to use their deduction skills to kind of figure out where you're at. But what makes this game more unique and really special in a way is that the game changes over the course of several sessions, I think about 12-ish sessions, because as you play, there are unlocks that are given to the team who last lost the game. So let's say, for example, in the first game, the recruiter won the game. They're able to do their objective in the allotted time and escape the grasps of the agents. The next time you play, there are little tuck boxes that have different types of abilities and skills, and you can open them in any order. There's no set order, and that will give an advantage to that team for the next game. And it's a permanent unlock, so you're now always going to have this advantage. Usually what means is the next game you play, the agents might win, which means now the recruiter gets to open a box and give themselves an additional advantage. And it keeps the game fresh and exciting and encourages you to want to open up more boxes and keep playing the game so you can kind of uncover what all the abilities are as you go through, eventually getting to a climax where both the agents and the recruiter are very powerful players with a lot more abilities. I really enjoy this game. The only thing I would say is a kind of a hindrance for me, and why it's probably lower in my top 50 overall, is that there's a time where you feel like you can only play this with the same group of players. And normally I feel like you should also keep consistent to whose roles were being played. So for example, if I was playing the recruiter, then I will always play the recruiter as we're unlocking things, and my opponents are always going to be the same agents. that can limit the people you play this with, and that might just be a personal thing for me, but it makes sense to me that someone who's playing this game, as they're progressing in the skill and the abilities of it, that you are doing the same thing as you get better unlocks and moving forward. So it just kind of a little thing for me, but still a brilliant game, Mind MGMT. Coming in at number 18, I don't actually have the box for this one. It's not in my collection right now. And that is Blood Rage from CMON Games. Blood Rage is part of the trilogy of area control-like games with Rising Sun and Ankh being the other two. Blood Rage is a Viking-themed version where players are going to be taking on their different Viking roles, and they're going to be signing them to different territories on the map, trying to gain victory points from those areas. Now, what makes Blood Rage so fun, and comparatively to other area control games, is the drafting mechanic is so good, as it allows you to draft different types of strategies and mechanics to help you win the game. It also gives you kind of an idea of what people are gearing themselves for, what kind of abilities they're going for. And so you can potentially hate draft, which is taking cards your opponent might want for themselves. Now, the only thing I don't care for Blood Rage, and it's something I found with most of the trilogy of these games, there's usually a strategy that involves you wanting to lose combats. You're wanting to die. You're wanting your units to die. And it's an interesting strategy because it's completely counterintuitive to normal war dudes on a map games. Normally you want to win the combat by having the most troops and doing the most damage and being the victor, the sole victor in the territory. But this strategy says, no, I actually want to lose. I want to be in as many combats as possible, and I want to lose these combats. And because I gain victory points or power from those deaths. And I found that strategy in almost every instance, actually, so this is kind of a random tangent. I found that strategy, when utilized by a player, especially if no one's hate drafting them and they're allowed to draft the cards freely, is one of the most powerful strategies, and it's very hard to defeat by other means. I think Blood Rage could be a higher game for me overall if it didn't have such a warping ability to control the game. I think most of those types of games actually would be. They all have that kind of element where they want you to have a different type of strategy or opportunity, but I felt like that one unfortunately kind of polarized the game. And unfortunately, it's talking about too much in this little top 20 because it's polarizing the game in that sense as well. But Blood Rage coming in at number 18. Coming in at number 17, we have Kemet from Matago. This is also part of a trilogy of games. We just talked about Blood Rage. Kemet is the Egyptian version of the game of like Inish or Cyclades, who basically kind of has some similar themes. Now, what I like about Kemet, it's another dudes on a map area control game where players are going to be trying to gain control of different types of priest temple locations to gain victory points through the several rounds that you're going to play. Now, but what makes Kemet more unique comparatively to other games is that the game starts effectively everyone being the exact same. There's no symmetry. It's just perfectly symmetry. There's no symmetry. There's perfect symmetry within each faction. So everyone effectively has the same starting point. But as soon as the game starts, you have to select a path between one of the different types of tech tiles, which are going to allow you to customize your faction. And these tech tiles are limited, so not everyone can have the same amount of technologies as you do, or can have the same abilities that you can do. And as you upgrade your pyramids to get higher levels in a certain color, you can buy tiles in that color of better strength as you get up to the highest tier, which is tier 4. Which is really cool is because players start kind of developing their own strategies and whatnot, and everyone starts having a completely different asymmetrical experience by the end of the game. The combat is also very, very fun. When you go to combat, you're restricted to the rules of the game of having 5 units unless you have some sort of tech tile that breaks that rule. But everyone knows what the strengths of the game are. And then you're going to go into combat with some cards in your hand. These cards are effectively the same as everyone else, unless, again, you have a tech tile that says differently. But we all have the same amount of cards. You are going to have to choose one to be your combat card. It's going to say how much strength you're going to do, how much damage you're going to do, and how much damage you're going to prevent. Every player, again, has those same cards, and you're going to have to play one face down to burn, which means it's going to be no longer available until you've used all your cards, and you'll play one face down to go into combat. But I mentioned there's dealing damage as well as actually inflicting wounds and then defending yourself. Kemet is a little different. It's not just having the highest attack power coming into the combat, because you don't actually inflict damage to those units unless you inflict wounds, which means you have to do the blood damage is what we call it. And there's different types of blood damage. You've got red blood damage, which is blockable. You have black blood damage, which is completely unblockable. And your goal is you're trying to not just win the combat, but also kill your opponent's troops. And so you have to kind of strategize, what card is my opponent going to play? What card do I want to play to get the most effective combat here to win, to gain control of this temple that we're fighting for, or different types of locations on an obelisk or something. And so it's a very strategic game, very fun, and one of my more favorite games of dudes on a map at 5 players. And it still plays in a good roughly hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, but roughly an hour and a half time limit. So yeah, that's Kemet, Blood, and Sand. This is specifically the Kickstarter edition. There was a retail version as well. I'm not sure what the availability on either one is, but yeah. Next we have at number 16, Too Many Bones. Now, Too Many Bones, unfortunately, has had one of the bigger drops from a top game. This was a top 5 game for me for many, many years. And it's not that Too Many Bones is a bad game. If we go back to the earlier videos, we talked about how do I rank these games. The first question I asked is it a great game? Is it something I enjoy? Yes, it is. Is it a game with easy to access rules? Not really. The accessibility aspect of Too Many Bones can start hampering it as something I want to play more often, especially when I'm trying to introduce it to new players. It's a very rules-heavy, deep game, and it seems like every time we have to bring it out and talk about it, it's another hour-long teach session to make someone feel comfortable with it, and then we have to dive into a completely asymmetrical gear lock who has a completely different type of gaming mechanic than, say, what I might be playing at that time. So sometimes it's hard for them to be like, well, I'll watch you and see what you're doing, because what I'm doing is going to be completely different from what you're doing. I think Too Many Bones is a completely unique experience. I love the adventure aspects of it. I love the customizations of being able to play different types of gear locks versus different types of baddies. It's a great joy. It just has a little bit too much weight that brings it down for me, and that's why it's now fallen down to number 16. Number 15. I'm curious where this one's going to be. This was in my top 10 last time. It has fallen a little bit, and that's War of the Ring. War of the Ring from Fantasy, or not Fantasy Flight. Originally, I think it was Fantasy Flight. This is from Ares now. War of the Ring is one of the most thematic games I have ever played. It's very, very similar to Rebellion, Star Wars Rebellion, if you've played that, where it says 2 to 4. It's 2 players, by the way. I would never recommend playing this in anything other than 2 players. But in this game, 1 player will take on the role of Sauron or the Shadow, where you're going to be playing the evil players, or the good, depending on your interpretation of it. And the other player will be playing the alliance of humans, elves, and dwarves. And you're going to be in a clash of Middle-earth while you are trying to either throw the 1 ring into Mount Doom and win the game, or you're going to have the ability to win through military combat. If you're the Alliance, you need to control 4 of your opponent's capital buildings. And if you're Shadow, I think it's like a 9 or 11. It's quite a bit. What this game provides is some of the most epic, thematic experiences I've ever had in a board game. It's very good at bringing you into the world with its different types of action cards that you'll be playing, which play out in the storyline of the movie or the books, whatever medium you know Lord of the Rings from. And it does a very good job at giving you that aspect as you hold as you hold up as you hold up in Helm's Deep, as Isengard begins their march towards you. There's a lot of really great thematic stuff happening. One of the coolest parts about this game, one of the reasons why I love this comparatively to other strategy games, is that the Alliance, their units, when you lose them, are not replaceable. You have a set amount of plastic units that are available for recruitment, and once those are used, you are no longer able to recruit them. So if you've lost all your elves and their leaders, they are done. You can't bring them back. Same thing with any dwarves or any humans that you may have. While the Shadow can constantly replace their units, so they're always going to go into combat trying to push as much stuff, and they don't care if they lose stuff because they can always retrain. So you can't win this game in a war of attrition as the humans. You have to be very strategic about when do you choose your fights, who do you fight, and if you're going to go for a military combat, getting the 4 territories, you've got to be very smart about how you're doing it and when you sally out and do whatever you can. The other option, obviously, is winning by the One Ring, by throwing them out Doom. But there's a whole mini game going there. We were trying to stealthily move along, and there is obviously one path that you might want to take that resembles what the movie did. There's alternative routes you might do, and they're going to be constantly hunting you down while the evil player has to dedicate dice to try to find you so they can send their Nazgul out to capture you. It's a really, really good thematic experience. Highly recommend it. Why is it sitting here now at number 15? It's unfortunately, again, another rules-heavy game that's very, very deep. And while it's rewarding to play it once you know it, it's very dense. And you have to, if you're going to teach someone this game, they're going to have to be dedicated to be like, okay, let's sit down for an hour and let's go through this game so you can understand it. And again, whenever I find a game that has that kind of rules overhead, I have to kind of, be aware of that. And that's why this one has fallen out of my top 10, but still an incredible game. Number 14, Clash of Cultures from WizKids. This is, as of right now, my pinnacle civilization game. I love this game. Clash of Cultures is an incredible realization of a game I've been asking for so long. If you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, I've talked about how I've been wanting a civilization game that gave me that feeling of starting a civilization from scratch and expanding them and growing them through advancements, through exploration and growth, to really get the feeling that I got when I was a kid playing RTS games. And Clash of Cultures is the first one to do that. Now, this is the Monumental Edition. This is a retail version of the game, so you can buy this at your local game stores. And what this has, comparatively to the original game, Clash of Cultures is an old game. It's like a 2010, 11, 12-ish era game. But it has an expansion called the Leaders Expansion. The Monumental Edition basically cleaned up and refined some of those rules and included the Leaders Expansion into this. And I'll tell you right now, if you want my advice and you're going to play Clash of Cultures, only play it with the Leaders Expansion. It really enhances the game. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you pick your game, you're going to be picking a nation. And in the Leaders Expansion, it's going to allow you to get some additional tech that are unique to your faction. So if you choose the Japanese, or if you choose the Egyptians, or if you choose the Romans, you're going to get additional tech that's only available to that specific nation. And you're also going to get 3 leaders that are available to you to recruit as an additional unit that has a special ability that you can affect the game with. The Leaders Expansion also expands the different types of units you can get, from just infantry to now including cavalry or even war elephants. It includes some pirates that adds an interesting element to the trading mechanisms. It's a really great expansion. Overall, Clash of Cultures takes the tech tree type games where it allows you to expand yourself and adds in enough of that 4X experience to really make this game one of the most enjoyable civilization games I've ever played, and I highly recommend checking it out if you have the opportunity to. Next, at number 13, we have Guards of Atlantis 2. I've done a review for Guards of Atlantis, so if you want to check that out, I highly recommend you can, where I can talk a lot about my opinions of this game. But I scored Guards of Atlantis 2 very highly. It is an incredibly great little thinky skirmish game, kind of like a MOBA. If you've ever played games like League of Legends, this is a great alternative to that on the tabletop. In this game, you are going to be choosing a hero, and you're going to be trying to defeat your opponent's heroes themselves, or eventually defeating their home castle or tower by pushing the minions to their base. What I like about this game is that each hero plays completely different than the other ones, and it has a very unique identity as you move through the game. You are going to select a character who has different types of cards that you eventually can level up and increase. And when you play these cards, they're going to have a speed of their initiative level. And that means that's when that player will move first. And they have the option of attacking the minions to eventually remove all your opponent's minions from a section. When if you do that, it will push it to the next section, which is kind of forces that gameplay movement that way. Or you can do some damage to your opponent. The strategy comes in this game, though, is trying to guess what your opponent's going to do and how are you going to play them based on the limited available cards that you have. It's a really, really well-made game. Very impressed with how they've developed all these different types of characters. And they didn't even do it like the more challenging characters don't necessarily mean that they are better in terms of their strength. They're just more unique and give it a little bit more complexity to get the most power out of them. It's a brilliant game, and I would highly recommend you trying it if you haven't already. Coming in number 12 is another game I don't have right now. I'm hoping to get it soon. It should be arriving very soon. Is Cthulhu Death May Die from CMON Games. Cthulhu Death May Die is one of my more enjoyable, relaxing, I would say party game, but it's not like a party game like you would expect, but more of like, let's just kind of have fun rolling dice, defeating cultists as we try to defeat the great old ones of Cthulhu lore. Cthulhu Death May Die, I was going to say Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Death May Die allows you to select an investigator of some sort, and you're going to try to defeat a scenario. It's a scenario-based game, which is also fun, where you can defeat a certain great old one, and you're gonna have to defeat also whatever the minions are trying to accomplish in that game. I love the dice rolling, the effects of getting more mad and becoming more powerful. It's a very, very fulfilling game, and it always seems like the games come down to the wire as you're playing it. I cannot wait for the season. I think it's season 3 and 4 that I have on Kickstarter, because that's when I want to get back in the collection as soon as possible, because I definitely miss playing it as much as I love it. So that is number 12. The last one is actually a campaign game, and I'm pulling out a smaller box just because it's easier than bringing on the heavier box. This is Chronicles of Drenagor. Now, I've got the big new expansion that just arrived with this one, but Chronicles, and I haven't played it yet, so hopefully we'll see where that one goes. Let's do this. Chronicles of Drenagor is a campaign game, very much classical in the sense of the type of high elf or high magic stuff you would consider with a classic magic game. And you are going to be choosing one of the normal roles like paladin, mage, priest. But what I love about this is that you can eventually cross class as well. And you can choose another class to become a hybrid to take abilities from a class you wouldn't normally have access to, giving you different types of strategies and abilities that you can play. You're going to be moving across this kind of three-dimensional terrain board that has an effect on the game, which is also kind of cool. Avoiding the shadow as it deals damage to you and increases the damage your opponents can give as well. Very classic game. Also uses a combat with cube system to kind of indicate what kind of actions you're going to take until you're exhausted, and then you have to recover them, which will again weaken you. So you have to be time of the essence kind of aspect when you're playing the game. I'm hoping to see where this goes in terms of its new expansion. Overall, it could raise or it could lower. We'll see. But that's right now number 11, Chronicles of Drenagor. So again, I thank you guys for watching this top 20. The top 10 is coming up right around the corner. I hope you guys enjoy the top 10, and give me your thoughts in the comment section down below regarding any of these games. Are any of these surprising to you? Are there any that are not surprising or should be higher or lower? Let me know. I'd love to see your thoughts. My name is Brian. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.